The Midnight Savior, A Bond Beyond Blood. The clock flickered past 8 p.m. Aditya, a branch manager at a prestigious bank, was navigating his car through the grueling Delhi traffic. The 23 kilometers journey felt like a marathon of 100 miles as the taillights of thousands of cars bled into a sea of red. Darkness was swallowing the city, and the blinding high beams from the opposite lane were making his eyes throb. As Aditya crossed into southwest Delhi, the congestion finally cleared. The stretch of road ahead was eerily silent and desolate. He pressed the accelerator, desperate to reach the comfort of his home, when a sudden flash of white on the roadside made him slam the brakes. Lying in the dirt was a girl, her body broken and still. The cruelty of the great city. Aditya rushed to her. She had a severe head injury and was unconscious. What broke Aditya's heart wasn't just her state, but the cold apathy of the world. Cars zoomed past, some slowing down just enough for the drivers to peer through their tinted windows before speeding away. This was the bitter truth of the modern metropolis. Countless people, but a haunting lack of humanity. Aditya looked for her purse or phone to call her family, but it was clear that someone had already looted her before fleeing. When he tried calling the emergency services, the calls dropped after a single ring. Her breathing was becoming shallow. Realizing time was running out, Aditya gently lifted her and placed her in the back seat of his car. He drove like a man possessed until he reached the nearest multi-specialty hospital, a contract with fate. At the emergency ward, the bureaucracy began. The doctor demanded a signature on an indemnity form and an immediate deposit of 10,000 rupees for the surgery. Since the girl was alone and nameless, Aditya didn't hesitate. He signed the papers and swiped his card. He told himself he'd take the money back once her family arrived, but deep down he knew he couldn't leave her. He spent the entire night pacing the sterile, white corridors of the hospital. Every time a nurse walked past or a machine beeped, his heart skipped a beat. It was as if his own soul was fighting for life in that ICU. As dawn broke, Aditya left his contact details with the duty doctor. "Call me the moment she wakes up," he said, before heading home to change for work. Shadows of the past. Aditya was the only child of parents who had raised him with impeccable values. However, his life had been a hollow shell for the last 2 years. In a cruel twist of fate, both his parents had died in a car accident in the very same hospital where he had just admitted the girl. As he sat in his cabin at the bank, the memories returned like a haunting film. The smell of antiseptics, the frantic search for blood donors, the crushing silence after the doctors delivered the final news. He had refused all marriage proposals since then, unable to imagine a future when his past was so heavy. Suddenly, at 4:30 p.m., his phone rang. It was the hospital. "She's conscious. Please come immediately." The unseen connection. Aditya's heart raced. He left the bank at exactly 6 p.m., leaving his assistant to close the branch. As he drove back through the traffic, his mind was a storm of questions. Who is she? Is she alone like me? Does she have someone waiting for her? He reached the hospital and found she had been moved to a private room. He stopped at the door, peering through the glass. Even in a drab blue hospital gown and bandages, she looked like a vision. She had deep obsidian eyes and a complexion as fair as wax, with features so delicate they seemed carved by an artist. He had never seen anyone so breathtaking. Aditya stepped inside. The nurse turned to the girl and whispered, "He is the one. He is the reason you are alive." The girl's eyes met Aditya's. For a moment, the world stopped. In her gaze, Aditya didn't see a stranger. He saw a mirror of his own solitude. "I don't know who you are," she whispered, her voice trembling, "but why did you save someone the world had forgotten?" Aditya walked closer, a strange peace washing over him. "Maybe," he said softly, "because I know exactly what it feels like to be forgotten." The Midnight Savior, Part 2, The Shattered Mirror. As Aditya stood by her bed, the girl's obsidian eyes searched his face, looking for a motive, a reason, or perhaps just a sign of safety. The nurse checked her vitals one last time and whispered to Aditya, She remembers her name, Meher, but she won't say anything else. Maybe she'll talk to you. The nurse stepped out, leaving a heavy, expectant silence in the room. A name, a mystery. Meher. Aditya repeated the name softly. It's a beautiful name. It means grace. The girl looked away, a tear tracing a path through the faint dust still clinging to her cheek. Grace is the last thing I deserve, she whispered. You shouldn't have paid the bill, Aditya. You should have let the road take what it started. Aditya sat on the plastic chair beside her, his bank manager instincts giving way to a raw, human empathy. 2 years ago, I stood in these same hallways waiting for my parents. No one stopped to help them until it was too late. When I saw you on that road, I didn't see a stranger. I saw a second chance. Not just for you, but for my conscience. Meher finally turned her head toward him. Her beauty was tragic, etched with a pain that went deeper than the bandages on her forehead. I didn't have an accident, Aditya, she said, her voice dropping to a haunting tremor. I was pushed. The darker truth, Aditya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hospital's air conditioning. Meher revealed that she was an orphan who had worked as an accountant for a powerful real estate firm in the city. A week ago, she had stumbled upon a massive money laundering trail involving the company's directors. I thought I could be a hero, she laughed bitterly. I took the files. I thought I could go to the police. But they found me. They took the bag, they took my phone, and they decided that a hit and run was the cleanest way to silence me. They must think I'm dead. Aditya's mind began to race. As a bank manager, he dealt with white-collar crime, but this was different. This was blood. If they find out you're here, they'll come back to finish the job. The protector's vow. For the first time in 2 years, Aditya felt a surge of adrenaline that wasn't born of grief. He looked at this fragile girl who had dared to stand against giants. You aren't going back to your apartment, Aditya said firmly. And you aren't staying here under your real name. I'll talk to the hospital director. We'll list you as Jane Doe for the records. Once you're discharged, you're coming with me. Meher looked at him, bewildered. Why? You've already done more than enough. I'm a liability, Aditya. A ghost. Because, Aditya said, standing up and looking out the window at the flickering city lights, I've spent 2 years living in a house full of ghosts. I think it's time I started protecting someone who's actually alive. The midnight visitor. That night, as Aditya prepared to leave for home to get some rest, he noticed a black SUV with tinted windows idling in the hospital parking lot. It wasn't an ambulance, and it didn't belong to any doctor. A man in a leather jacket got out, lit a cigarette, and looked up at the windows of the private ward, counting the floors. Aditya ducked behind a pillar, his heart hammering against his ribs. The hunters had found the scent. He realized then that saving Meher wasn't just a one-night act of kindness. It was the beginning of a dangerous game where the stakes were no longer just money or medicine, but their very lives. Aditya didn't go to his car. Instead, he turned back toward the hospital entrance, his mind spinning a plan. He wasn't just a bank manager anymore. He was a man standing between a girl and her grave. The Midnight Savior, Part 3, The Silent Heist. Aditya's heart was drumming a frantic rhythm against his chest. He didn't go to his car. He knew that the man in the leather jacket was likely checking the hospital registry at that very moment. If he waited for morning, Meher wouldn't be a patient anymore. She'd be a statistic. The switch? Aditya rushed back to the private ward, bypassing the main elevators and taking the service stairs. He burst into Meher's room, startling her. Meher, we have no time, he whispered, his eyes scanning the room. They're here. The color drained from her face. Already? But how? It doesn't matter how, Aditya said, his brain working in high gear. He spotted a laundry cart in the hallway and grabbed a spare nurse's coat and a surgical mask from the station. Put these on. We're leaving through the basement. But the bill, the discharge papers, Meher stammered. I've already signed the indemnity, Aditya replied. In the eyes of this hospital, I am responsible for you. If you go missing, I'll deal with the legal fallout later. Right now, I need you to be a shadow. The descent. He helped her out of bed. She winced, the pain in her head flare up, but she gritted her teeth. With the mask on and the nurse's coat draped over her hospital gown, she looked like just another weary staff member ending a double shift. Aditya walked beside her, acting as if he was a doctor discussing a file. As they reached the elevators, the doors opened. The man in the leather jacket stepped out. Aditya froze. He instinctively pulled Mihir closer, turning her face toward his shoulder as if they were in a deep, private conversation. The man brushed past them, his eyes fixed on the room numbers. He was headed straight for room 402, Mihir's room. Keep walking, Aditya breathed into her ear. They slipped into the service elevator just as the man reached her door. They descended into the cold, concrete depths of the hospital basement, where the smell of bleach and old machinery hung heavy. A different kind of shield. Instead of going to the main parking lot where his car was a sitting duck, Aditya led her to the ambulance bay. He saw a young driver he had tipped earlier that morning while getting coffee. "Rahul," Aditya called out. "I need a favor." A big one. 10 minutes later, a local ambulance pulled out of the hospital with its sirens off. Inside, hidden among the oxygen tanks, were Aditya and Mihir. They didn't go to Aditya's luxury apartment in the city. That would be the second place they'd look. Instead, they headed toward an old, forgotten farmhouse on the outskirts of Delhi that belonged to Aditya's late grandfather. The sanctuary. By 2 a.m., they reached the farmhouse. It was a secluded place, surrounded by thick neem trees and overgrown hedges. The air was cooler here, silent except for the chirping of crickets. Aditya helped Mihir onto an old wooden bed. He lit a single lamp, the yellow glow reflecting off the dusty walls. "You're safe here," he said, handing her a glass of water. "No one knows I own this place, not even my bank colleagues." Mihir looked at him, her eyes glistening. "You've risked your job, your reputation, and now your life for me." "Why, Aditya? You don't even know if I'm telling the truth." Aditya looked at the old photograph of his parents on the mantelpiece. "My parents died because people looked the other way. I promised myself I'd never be one of those people. Besides," he added with a faint, tired smile, "for the first time in 2 years, I feel like I'm finally awake." The storm clouds gather. Mihir reached into the lining of her hospital gown. She pulled out a small encrypted micro SD card she had managed to hide before the accident. "This is why they want me dead," she said. "It's not just money laundering. It's a list of politicians they've been bribing for a decade. If we can get this to the right person, the whole deck of cards falls." Aditya took the card. He knew that as long as they had this, they were the most dangerous people in Delhi. But he also knew that the man in the leather jacket wouldn't be alone for long. As the sun began to peek over the horizon, Aditya sat by the window, a kitchen knife in his hand, the only weapon he had. He watched the dirt road, waiting. He knew the quiet wouldn't last. The bank manager and the orphan were now at war with the city's shadows. The Midnight Savior, Part 4, The Ledger of Lies. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of the farmhouse, casting long, golden streaks across the floor. Mihir was resting, her breathing finally steady, while Aditya sat at a rickety wooden table with his laptop. He had used a secure, offline boot to access the micro SD card Mihir had risked her life to save. Decoding the shadows. As a bank manager, Aditya was an expert at reading between the lines of a balance sheet. But as the files on the card opened, his blood ran cold. This wasn't just a list of bribes. It was a sophisticated shadow ledger. It tracked ghost accounts used to funnel money into offshore tax havens. As he scrolled deeper into the encrypted folders, one name stood out, a name that made the laptop nearly slip from his hands. Rajveer Khanna. Rajveer wasn't just a politician. He was the chairman of the very bank Aditya worked for. He was the man who had signed Aditya's promotion letter. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The accident that killed his parents 2 years ago happened right after his father, a senior auditor, had started an internal investigation into Khanna's private holdings. It wasn't an accident. Aditya whispered, his voice cracking. They killed them. They killed my parents to protect this. The trap is sprung. Mihir walked into the room, leaning against the doorframe. She saw the look on Aditya's face. You found someone you know, didn't you? I found the man who destroyed my world, Aditya replied, his eyes burning with a new, dangerous resolve. And now, I'm going to destroy his. But their moment of realization was cut short. Outside, the gravel crunched. A black SUV, the same one from the hospital, rolled slowly up the dirt path, followed by two more. They hadn't found the farmhouse through a leak. They had tracked Aditya's phone. In his haste to save Mihir, he had forgotten to pull the battery. The standoff. Aditya grabbed the laptop and the micro SD card. Mihir, get to the cellar. Now! I'm not leaving you, she protested. If they get this card, everyone who died for it was for nothing. Go! He pushed her toward the trapdoor hidden under the kitchen rug just as the front door was kicked off its hinges. 3 men entered. In the center was the man in the leather jacket, now holding a silenced pistol. Behind him stood a man in an expensive suit, the bank's head of security, a man Aditya had trusted. Aditya, the man in the suit said smoothly, you were always a brilliant manager. Why ruin a promising career for a girl you found in a ditch? Give us the card and we can forget you ever left the hospital. The final transaction. Aditya stood his ground, the laptop tucked under his arm. He was no fighter, but he was a strategist. He noticed the old gas stove behind him, the pilot light flickering. The card is already uploaded to a cloud server with a dead man's switch, Aditya lied, his voice remarkably steady. If I don't enter a code every 60 minutes, it goes live to the Central Bureau of Investigation and every major news outlet in the country. Kill me, and you kill Rajveer Khanna's career. The man in the leather jacket stepped forward, his eyes narrowed. He's bluffing. Try me, Aditya challenged. But ask yourself, is Khanna worth going to prison for? Because once that file hits the news, he'll throw you to the wolves to save himself. The tension in the room was suffocating. Outside, the wind howled through the neem trees. Aditya's hand moved toward the gas valve of the old stove, ready to end it all if they took a single step closer. The midnight savior, the final settlement. The man in the leather jacket leveled his suppressed pistol at Aditya's chest. The air in the kitchen was thick with the smell of dust and the faint, whistling hiss of the gas valve Aditya had subtly cracked open. The cloud upload is a lie, the security head sneered, stepping closer. You're a bank manager, Aditya, not a hacker. Give us the card. Aditya looked at the man who represented the institution that had betrayed his family. A calm, cold smile spread across his face. You're right. I'm not a hacker, but I am an auditor. And an auditor always has a backup. The leverage. Aditya held up his phone. On the screen wasn't a cloud upload, but a live video call. The contact name read, Internal Affairs, RBI. I didn't just open the files, Aditya said, his voice echoing in the tense silence. I flagged the ghost accounts within the bank's central server using my manager's override. The moment you stepped into this house, the Reserve Bank's fraud detection triggered a lockdown on Rajveer Khanna's personal assets. He's not a powerful man anymore. He's a liability. The men froze. In the distance, the faint but unmistakable wail of sirens began to tear through the morning air. Aditya had known that the police wouldn't respond to a hit-and-run call against a titan like Khanna, but they would respond to a high-priority alert of a multi-crore bank heist in progress. The collapse. Realizing the game was up, the man in the leather jacket lunged forward. Aditya swung the heavy laptop, clipping the man's jaw, and dove behind the kitchen island. Drop the weapon, a voice thundered from the porch. A tactical team swarmed the farmhouse, led by a female detective Aditya had contacted through the bank's secret whistleblower line months ago, back when he first suspected his parents' death wasn't an accident. Within minutes, the men who had hunted Mihir were in zip ties. A new dawn. As the dust settled, Mihir emerged from the cellar, her eyes wide with shock and relief. She walked over to Aditya, who was sitting on the porch steps, his hands finally beginning to shake. "It's over," he whispered. "You did it," she said, sitting beside him. "You didn't just save me. You finished what your father started." The final balance. 6 months later, the headlines had faded. Rajveer Khanna was behind bars, and the bank had undergone a massive restructuring. Aditya had resigned from his post. He no longer wanted to be part of that world of cold numbers. Instead, he used the remainder of his parents' insurance and his own savings to open a foundation, a legal aid and rehabilitation center for victims of corporate crime. He named it the Grace Foundation. As the sun set over the same stretch of road where he had found her, Aditya's car slowed down. But he wasn't alone this time. Mir sat in the passenger seat, her health fully restored, a laptop in her lap as they worked on their latest case together. Aditya looked at the roadside where he had once slammed his brakes in despair. The darkness was still there, and the city was still busy, but he was no longer a ghost wandering the hallways of his past. He reached over and took Mir's hand. The transaction was complete. The debt of his parents' memory had been paid in full, and for the first time in his life, Aditya's heart was in the black. The end. I hope